So before we move on, just because I will forget if I don't say it now, in the spirit of feedback, you have feedback forms in your packs. We want to learn from what your views of this event were, and we want to know how we can make it better, and we want to know how we can incorporate what you've learned from today into further initiatives within the project. Please also be aware that my very shrewd colleague has pointed out we don't currently have your permission to show any photographs that we've taken of you. So in order to not have a data breach at our own conference, if you would wish not to have your photograph displayed publicly, please would you make yourself known at the end of the speakers. We will make sure that we work out which are your photographs and we won't show them. So anyway, the bit that I was supposed to talk about. Welcome to the final session. Thank you very much for sitting with us throughout today and for our fantastic speakers. It's been quite an incredible day. Oh, where are we going here? Sorry, it's been an incredible day, and we're so grateful for all of our speakers for having helped with such an incredible agenda.
So I've written down a few quotes of the day that I'd like to share with you, just to run through the amazing people that we've had talking with us today. So Gordon, whilst making us all cry, said, "Live life and live it to the full." Jonathan said, "Make a difference doing the job you do." How cool. This is just our daily job, and what a difference we can make. Rob said we need to change our mindset. We can do practicing and performing at the same time. And asking for feedback on our own practice only gains purposeful practice. He also said that there was a lack of case-based feedback, which is nice for us, thank you. Yes, there's a need. And we should always be thinking about how we can make ourselves better. John Barrett said Waltham Abbey is not on Towie, and I actually think it is, so not that I watch that sort of telly. It's on the Discovery Channel or something. And he also said that using System 1 thinking relies on identifying a pattern and us acting instinctively. And I think that absolutely I do that. So slowing it down and making our thinking more deliberate. It's not what to think, but how to think. I made some comment about not using fluffy tape, so let's pass that one by. Tony said that valuable outcome data as a result of feedback and a debrief directly improves our understanding. Esther said, "Be kind to yourself, look after yourself, give your brain a time out." And Tracy, "Continue to be curious and disruptive." Yes, feedback is a collaboration to improve care and caring for the carers, and that's us. Thank you. Now we will talk about our feedback.
So, what we've been trying to show you today is why we believe that it's necessary to have case-based, debrief-led, hospital to pre-hospital feedback. We hope that we've shown you why we think this is important, not just for our staff, but also for our patients. Over the first 6 months of the project, we conducted a small pilot study, and they are small numbers, but we're very lucky to have in the audience some of our team from Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow. This team of Gio, Talia, Rosie, Alice, Richard, Kaveri, and Juan have done an outstanding job in not just standing in front of you making it sound like a good idea and shaking hands, but they've actually been in their own time with no protected time whatsoever in their lunch breaks and after work, doing all of the work that you've heard discussed today. They've been going through patient notes, they've been trying to distill down the core learning, and they've been putting that into meaningful reports for our clinicians out there in our communities, looking after our patients to make best use of. To all of you, I just want to say an enormous thank you. We've been lucky in the people that we've had through the team. It's been a diverse team, and of the people who've been involved in Harlow, both on the ambulance and non-ambulance side, we're pleased that we've had a good 50-50 split in gender balance. And whilst we acknowledge we're still quite a doctor-heavy team, we're gradually building more and more non-doctors, by which I mean people like Grace and Anne from the ambulance side. But I'm also very pleased to say that, especially given such an incredible review earlier, we have a patient representative who is Gordon, who has agreed to be the voice and champion for the patient voice going forward for PHEM Feedback. So he joins our list of extended team, which we're really excited for. So what did our team do for these 6 months? Again, small pilot, small numbers. So over 6 months, there were 28 requests which we accepted. We turned down some requests. Some of them because we didn't feel they met the minimum educational merit to warrant our team in their own time focusing on that particular case. And that might have been things that are learnable in a textbook. You know, what's the side effect of drug X? What medicines can you give for condition Y? And there were many more that I suspect our debriefers have also said, actually, I think the answer to your query can be answered just between the two of us without having to get the PHEM Feedback team involved in this. And I don't want that to be seen as a negative. I want us to see that we were a very finite resource with no funding in our own time. And I think that was an excellent use of our time to make sure we focused on the most appropriate and cases which the information we could give back to people would change their practice or reinforce their practice to the greatest degree. So of those 28, we went through and we made sure all of them had reports. Of the 28, all of them had a debrief. And of those reports, 25% of the clinicians, sorry, 25%, apologies, nearly 90% of the clinicians, so 25 of them, completed their satisfaction survey. What we learned from this small study, which again, unfortunately there was some unanticipated issues, particularly because our legal premise to do this means that we have to use NHS.net end-to-end to make it the most secure for data transfer. We didn't quite anticipate how difficult it would be to get our paramedic colleagues and tech colleagues access to this. But of the ones that we did manage to help, almost all of them satisfied or very satisfied with the information that our hospital team returned to them. Broadly, we're getting clinicians submitting to us who are there or thereabouts or spot on with their diagnosis, meaning that what we're doing is predominantly positive reinforcement of jobs well done. Most people report being positively affected or very positively affected by the engagement with the project with regard to their well-being. And everybody, 100% of our respondents said they were satisfied or very satisfied with their debrief. There's an interesting discrepancy on the graph, which is someone reported they were adversely affected by engaging with this. I don't want to go into it too much because we did follow it up and it's still sort of someone's personal reflections. These were issues sort of external to engaging with our process, but we've left them in our data because I think doing new work like this, we will find from time to time interesting signals that are well worthy of keeping within our data set and highlighting to our colleagues in the east of England. So you'll note that even though someone said they were adversely affected, we still have no one saying they were dissatisfied with the returned information, and everybody said they were satisfied or very satisfied with their debrief, which is wonderful. Again, thank you to the hospital team and everyone who returned their satisfaction surveys for engaging with this.
Okay, but we haven't stopped here. So we know that the debriefs we're 100% satisfied with, but we think we can do better. Tracy, Esther and I have put our brains together in these lovely hexagons that Matt draws for us. And we have combined ideas about this potential debriefers course. And John Talbot and my entire paramedic department have also supported me with these ideas. We are trying to speak. We are trying to collaborate with not only the East of England Ambulance Service, but also Queen Mary's University London, who are coming on board potentially as a result of Esther's involvement in this group. We are hoping that we can come up with a one-day debriefers course, which means that people who will be in the position of debriefers, whether they're senior colleagues in the ambulance service, senior colleagues in other services, or the air ambulance, may come down for a day and get a whole day of training based upon theory, research, findings, how's best to debrief someone when the news is good, how's best to debrief them when it's bad. And also looking at the medico-legal side of things, if we do get a case where there's difficulties in the management and that has been a bad outcome, which again we didn't really see much of in our pilot, but there is the potential for that, then the debriefer needs to be able to take control of that and not panic our colleague and instead talk them through the next processes. We think it's really important that these people are senior colleagues, important that they want to apply for the role. So this will be a role that people apply for, we interview or we put through an assessment criteria, and then they are given the position. This is an absolute privilege to be a debriefer for the colleagues around you, and we really want to invest in those people and make them the best they can be and support them in their journey doing that.
Similarly, for our hospital colleagues, we have Gio in the audience today, over there. Gio is our hospital's lead and also the site lead for Harlow. And what he's doing is making sure that we improve our professional standards in the way that we conduct ourselves when writing these reports. He's working to create report authoring best practice to make sure that we're giving the most appropriate information to our clinicians, as well as ensuring report quality control. And he's going to look at what training our hospital teams need to be able to do this. At present, what our team have been asked of them is to bring a positive attitude and mandatory information governance training from the Trust. But we know that we want to invest in our hospital teams, who again are doing this in their own time. And whilst we acknowledge that this is a challenge for them, we believe that we can make it appealing for our hospital teams to be able to do this.
Okay, and then we also have the patient safety team, which work underneath Tracy with the East of England Ambulance Services. We have named Rob and Richard at the top there. Both of these and your entire team have helped combine our ideas with PHEM Feedback, with the Learning from Incidents Days. In East of England, there are now events going on telling people about the results of a serious incident. It's important that we learn, and that we learn as a mass group of clinicians rather than one-to-one feedback. So this suits our PHEM Feedback idea so nicely that we're now going to collaborate on these days and hopefully share some quick cases with the groups that they're talking to. Equally, there's the SCORE Culture Survey, which is run by Rich, and was his idea that we actually bring to the project. If we can demonstrate that the culture of the ambulance service is different as a result, or improved as a result of a PHEM Feedback project like this, we can really show the benefit of having such a project. And we thank you for your enthusiasm in this too.
We don't want to stop at Harlow. And I think one of the questions I've been asked a few times today is, what are we going to do to make sure that we can bring this to new people? Juan, our photographer-in-chief, but also implementation lead for the project, has worked really hard and collaborated with Dr. Hock from Southend, Dr. Kushonko from Colchester, and Talia and Jas Mahindra from West Herts in Watford. Together, they are trying to bring PHEM Feedback to new hospitals who are attended by new patients and looked after by our fellow clinicians, to create a broader spread of this learning, and so that we can try and make it ubiquitous within the region, that this is an expectation, not just something that you're lucky enough to have. We're very excited also that our friends from East Anglian Air Ambulance have been very supportive of our project and are close to being involved moving forward as well. And whilst I can't elaborate on them in more detail, there are some very exciting links we're exploring with other services, which in due course we can discuss in more detail.
So mysterious. Okay, and introducing Dr. Shad, who is in the audience today, with Phase 3, new services. Now we have colleagues here from the fire service. We also have MB John Newman and his lovely wife Sandra, who are our community first responders. We also have Dave, who's here from Heart, and John, who's here from Basics. I know that there's a whole mix of you in this room, but the fact that you're here means that this is of interest to you. The problem is that you see these patients on scene and you wave goodbye to them as the crew fly them off to hospital. drive them off to hospital, unless they'd commandeered the aircraft. Drive them off to hospital. Now, how can people in heart get closure if they simply wave that patient off? The fire brigade may not have an understanding of the clinical presentation of the patient, and actually, as soon as they're whisked off, they have no idea what they've been looking at that whole time, yet have been absolutely instrumental into getting that patient to hospital safely. We all work together so much that this should absolutely be spread and passed backwards to the people that start it, the people that get there first. So the idea of this is that even if you don't transport the patient to hospital, you'll be able to contact the control room and ask for a number that would correspond with the patient going into hospital. You can then request your own feedback, and that is the plan, to spread the joy.
With regards to our technology, as I've mentioned before, at present we rely on nhs.net email end-to-end in order to preserve the safety of the data that we're transferring from our systems to that of our pre-hospital debriefer colleagues. Dr. Laurie Greenfield is our technical officer. He's the person responsible for our website and to whom we're incredibly grateful. The website's given us a digital presence for us to display the kind of work we're doing. But what we're really excited about in addition to our website presence is that we've engaged with a company called Bloomsbury Health who run a product called Refer a Patient. Refer a Patient is an online confidential patient information exchange portal, by which I mean if I, in my emergency department, wanted to refer someone to a neurosurgical specialist, I could do so by typing in through a website that is secure and with good, robust information governance, all of the details, including name, date of birth, and NHS number, hospital number, send it through a secure portal to the neurosurgeon at the other end, who could then return with the advice that they would suggest for the management of that patient. And our friends at Refer a Patient, when we spoke to them about what we're trying to achieve, showed enormous generosity, and they really support the kind of work we're doing as a kindred spirit of that of their own. Refer a Patient have said that they will support us going forward, and we're working to develop a means that doesn't rely on email and PDF attachments, which is what we've relied on so far. And we hope in the coming months we'll be able to implement this at least one site as a trial before hopefully moving to a more ergonomic, modern and simple process to get our clinicians and debriefers the information that we want them to learn from. The thing is, we've said a lot today about PHEM feedback and what we feel are the benefits. Tracy's also said some things. The reality is that we know what we are doing is not a silver bullet. We know more needs to be done, and we know we probably can't do that as well. So, I think we are lucky that a lot of the people in this room are people from the feedback community doing similar work elsewhere. And there's also people doing work that's similar in spirit, but different in scale. I think in the audience today, I can't quite find her, but we have Sophie Clark, one of the PIs. Okay, I found you now. We have several of the investigators from FED Data, Pre-Hospital Emergency Department Data Linking Project. This is a several orders of magnitude scale different way of doing learning from the hospital environment. They match up entire populations worth of London's patients who are dealt with in the pre-hospital sphere by LAS, and then they match up that information through multiple hospitals to look at patterns of how groups of patients move through the system and where services can be redesigned. This is well beyond the resources of something like PHEM feedback in its current guise. However, through my conversations with Sophie Clark, we both acknowledge that actually PHEM feedback has a nuanced ability to look for patient and clinician-specific information that guides a much more narrow idea of what we can do at the clinician level to make things better. And so the way we see it as part of our team is whilst we're part of a fabric of patient safety, which enwraps the patients we look after. We have to keep working with people like the people in this audience who are out there championing for patient safety and clinician education. And if we continue to do that collectively, we will make differences to our patients, we will make difference to our colleagues, and I believe we will drive forward the standard of healthcare in the region. We know we have work to do. We've already said we want to improve our information flow. We want to seek permission to use other identifiers rather than just the ED number, such as the NHS number. We want to improve the standard training for our hospital teams, as well as that of our debriefers. Expand our learning to wider audiences so that the most people can benefit from this learning and bring that learning to their next patient. We want to collaborate with our colleagues doing similar work. And through all of this, patients will be kept at the heart of everything we do. Whilst it's mandatory for me to make sure that I pass the outcomes of a hospital visit from a patient to their GP for the ongoing care of that patient, it's much more difficult to justify doing it for a paramedic or an air ambulance clinician who might never meet them again. We've gone through quite a few information governance hurdles, which some would say are not necessary. We're of a different opinion based on our discussions with our information governance team. But whatever it is we do, we're trying to be maximally risk averse whilst also keeping patients at the heart of any process that we use to transfer the information which belongs to them. We've already spoken about how privileged we are to have Gordon being part of that process to keep patients at the heart of what we're doing. And you have our sorry, my words escape me. We will continue to make sure that we maintain our obligations to high standards of information governance, particularly with the national data opt-out policy on the horizon, which needs to be implemented by 2020 in spring. Because what we want to make sure is that we remain information governance compliant, that we remain beneficial for our staff, and that we remain acceptable to our patients. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you so much for your attention today, and I hope you've enjoyed the conference. If you'd permit me, I think Grace and I would like to say some thank yous to many of the people who've made today possible. May I start by saying thank you to the University of Hertfordshire, our hosts and partners who've made us feel so welcome and so valued. East of England Ambulance Service, who have essentially taken a bit of a punt on a junior doctor and a paramedic who came to them with an idea and said, we think we can change the way things are done. Tracy ran with this idea and has championed it enormously, so thank you to you and all of the staff at East. Princess Alexandra Hospital is where this happened, and it only happened because of the belief of people like our Chief Medical Officer and the people in charge of our department. And then it only continued to happen because of the cascade down through our colleagues in the admin departments who help print our posters and laminate them and give us blue tack to put them up in patient-facing areas. And it only happened because we had such coaching from our information governance colleague. And it only happened because we could recruit enthusiastic junior doctors to make it happen. Thank you also to the people who are trying to make this happen elsewhere in the region. We really appreciate your faith in us, and we want to make sure we do everything we can to support you through that process. Thank you to EHAPS, the first air ambulance organisation to run with us and to give us a go, and for their very kind endorsement today. Thank you to our sponsors, Stryker, Class Professional Publishing, College of Paramedics, for their support in making today happen, and the enormous contributions made by the University of Hertfordshire admin team, they've worked so hard to make today happen, and we've not always been the easiest taskmasters. So to all of the UH team, thank you so much. Finally, or nearly finally, sorry, this feels a bit Oscars, there's no orchestra, unlucky. Thank you so much to our clinicians who are out there doing fantastic work, day in, day out, in tough circumstances. Keep doing what you're doing, keep learning, we'll do everything we can to help. To our debriefers who have been in their own time helping people to learn. To our hospital team who we've talked about already in their own time once again, bringing this knowledge to them. To the extended PHEM Feedback team, part of the leadership team, and also those of you who have joined us. And finally, I think to our spouses families and friends. Grace and I each doing a master's and a full-time job in addition to everything we're doing for this, and that comes at a cost to some of the time that we spend with our family and friends. So to all of you for your support as well, thank you. I said finally, last one, Grace has done remarkable work in making today happen, and I'm very proud to be standing up here with her. So, thank you everyone in the audience, we're so grateful. We're going to ask the panel to come up now. We want all of our speakers to join us up at the front. We have, unless my dreadful Oscars reel went on too long,
No, you're fine.
we have 25 minutes to ask questions. But while they're coming up, let me just say thank you very, very much for your attention. So our sessions have been quite brief and they've been quite condensed, and we've not been able to answer as many questions as we might have hoped to, but here's your opportunity. If you'd like to ask specific questions about how the project works, you may, although I'm around for the rest of the evening in the drinks reception, so if you want to make the most of the experts who are up here in front of you, please do so. Can we start with social media, Laurie? How do we get trainees to catch Rob's passion for learning? Well, who wants it? So I think Rob's sort of spoken on this topic. Does anyone else want to offer an opinion as to how this might happen?
Crikey, look, I've got to do two things, hold this and talk. Right, so this is for you, Claire. So Claire and I are educators in a medical school when we're not doing things like this. And listening to Rob's talk, what really struck me was that actually he engaged with his learning when he was left on his own. That's what happened. He found his autonomy and he kind of went, yeah, no, I do want to do this, actually, thanks very much. So putting people through the mill of endless exams and lots of assessment and things like this isn't always the best way to get them to engage. And if we can think of techniques that involve giving them some autonomy, opportunity to find their own feet, perhaps even grow up a bit, can I say that? Let a bit of time pass. That's what I meant. Let a bit of time pass so that they can find their way.
I think a really important thing to do as an educator is to ask, or as a senior, is to ask your junior or ask the learner what they would like feedback on. So an excellent book that I've recently read is called Thanks for the Feedback. And there are lots of different types of feedback, and often you get given, as somebody who's gone through a learning moment, seen a case, and there's lots of points to discuss. You want feedback on certain things, but often you don't get given it. So I think that's the first thing I would say that empowers the learner, perhaps makes them more enthusiastic if they're getting the feedback they're actually wanting. The other thing is, I think as an educator, as a senior, it's quite empowering to see them seeking feedback too. I often find that, as I mentioned in my talk, when you're a senior person, you kind of, the obvious channels of feedback disappear. So when you actively seek it, even from your juniors, it's quite inspiring to see that. So that's what I would add to that question.
Thank you. Any from the audience? I think, is it Jordan at the back?
Question for all the clinicians, really. John, you were talking about the sort of cognitive biases that you have. For all of you, in those kind of high-stress situations, how would you want one of your colleagues to question anything or offer advice? You know, you're in that kind of tense situation. You just want to get the patient to hospital. How would you want that feedback or that questioning offered to you?
So the question sounds like, how do you help someone who's succumbing to becoming overwhelmed and their cognitive biases? How do you reorientate them to what you might have observed as someone more objective?
So I'll start off, and hopefully Tony will follow, because I think a lot of this comes from how we operate in the HEMS environment. So firstly, the thing about cognitive biases is that we're all affected by cognitive bias, and actually the more you know about them, the more you realise how you're affected by them. So awareness has to be the first step. So in HEMS, we're really lucky that we work alongside our aviation colleagues, and a lot of what they do is translated into the way we practice medicine. Would you agree? So, for example, when you're flying in a two-person aircrew, one person has eyes out, one person has eyes in, if they're looking at something like a map or something like that. And you actually communicate that, which we don't do very well in medicine, but actually, when you look at how high-performing teams work, when you become part of one of those teams, you realise that there's a lot of transference of what we do in aviation into medicine, and we will actually say to each other, I've got eyes in now, you keep eyes out, in terms of absorbing the rest of and keeping that situational awareness, because we know we're becoming task-focused, and we'll actually use that terminology, you're becoming task-focused, your bandwidth's becoming narrowed, to highlight to our colleagues, but that can only happen if both of you are on the same page and you've been training together and you're aware of those biases. Would you add anything there, Tony?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, we talk again a lot in the HEMS teams about the hierarchy gradients as well, and I think if you're not in the way that you respond to on scene, if there is a hierarchy perceived, then people are less likely to give you that feedback. And I think it's all about just being open, honest on scene, no matter what your level, seniority or experience, and be willing to take that feedback, that learning. You might not necessarily agree with it, but at least have that discussion on scene and be open to them suggestions, and you'll get a much better outcome, I think, for the patients.
Just adding to that, I would say that also this all depends on someone being aware of what those issues are, and I think we need to rely heavily on our colleagues to pull us out of that. And if you're working in kind of an isolated environment, it's even more important that you put those checklists, sort of those cognitive stop points in to stop yourself slipping into those. But it's incredibly difficult at the best of times, because we're all trying to do our best. So don't be too critical of yourself if you find yourself in that situation. And just try and be kind as you try and reorientate someone and clear. I think that's what I'd suggest. Anyone else that I can ask a question? Gentleman there, please.
So we've talked a lot today about sort of learning from experience and stuff. One of the things that obviously as clinicians we deal with is burnout and everything like that. Is there anything that we can be doing to prevent that burnout in the first place? I appreciate this is designed about feedback, but whilst we've got someone here whose specific job is to look at sort of how to deal with the situation in the psychological review, are there any tools, tricks that we can use to prevent it in the first place?
So the question is, which strategies can we employ to minimise the risk of burnout? And do you mean we as in individuals, or we as in organisations, or both?
Both.
Okay.
I'm really aware that there's quite a long answer to that question, and people probably want to go and get a drink. Yeah, there are things you can do tonight. You can do it now. I'm a great fan of things like minute mindfulness. So there's a lot to be said about making contact with the present moment, because when we're upset, we get very, I suppose what I'd call heady. We're right up here and it's spinning around in our heads. So one of the things that you can do, I know it sounds daft, but one of the best things you can do, breathe out. You know when they say focus on your breathing, everybody goes, even though they've already got a lungful. Breathe out. When we're stressed, we hold our breath. So first breathe out. When you do it, your shoulders drop. I'm a great fan, if you follow me on Twitter, I'm obsessed with feet. Stand properly on your feet, all four corners of your feet. So doing stuff like that grounds you down in the earth, and that is really important because it makes you be present now. Because when you're doing that, when you're thinking about breathing out and dropping your shoulders or standing properly on your feet, watching your posture, you're not worrying. So you're giving yourself a break. Breaks in general are really important. So that's an organisational thing, is noticing how a shift pattern's working, who needs time off. Can we stand people down easily when they need it so that they can take a break with no detriment? So they take a break when they need it and be able to come back. So there are organisational things, but very many of the it's not all on the individual, but there are lots of things we can do as individuals. The other thing about kindness, that Tracy was talking about, kindness, when we're at work, really almost no matter what our work is, we very often approach our colleagues with our trouble on our face. So we don't go in to ask them a question with a lovely, open, smiling face. We usually are thinking about what we want to ask them, so we've got quite a serious face. So smile. Just, see, you all did it when I said it. That's what's great about it. If there's just one person in each shift that you can make eye contact with, doesn't have to be for long, give them a genuine smile and say hello to them and ask them how they are like you mean it. You'd be surprised how much it will affect you and how much benefit it will bring. And now I'm going to stop because I could be here all night. So.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? The gentleman in the white shirt in the middle.
So I appreciate this obviously developmental stage is ongoing, and Tracy's very much about trying to change the culture within ambulance service for 6 years. And I hope that's obviously a key part of the project is kind of voluntary, so you'll kind of come forward and request feedback, and you said it'd be to a large extent confirmation or positive in terms of the case that you presented. At the side being kind of interested to kind of publish the kind of demographics and the spread of the sorts of cases you're regularly getting, and you're very open to contribute. I was just kind of wondering, trying to build towards a culture, sometimes culture at some level has to be forced on people initially to kind of get momentum. So is there a case that in the same way we've kind of spoken about trauma cases, but HEMS, for example, have a model where we dispatch on these 10 categories of patients. Is there a course of thinking, well, actually, if we want to get more clinicians, particularly those clinicians who won't volunteer to get feedback, is that for these 10 categories of patients, we automatically just generate a feedback report for them anyway? Is that something you've thought about, or is that just in your ethos that you're trying to?
Do you want to fire up to this one? So we've thought about this a lot, and in fact, most of the time when we speak to people at events like this, we're asked, what about the people who aren't looking to get feedback? I am quite nervous about this being seen as enforced in this moment, at this point in the cultural change, because my fear is that it will become bastardized into a means by which people are disciplined and told off. I think the more beneficial thing is to, through kind of creeping acceptance, let more and more people experience the positive benefits of this sort of debrief, which you've heard today from people who really believe in it. And there's a lot of cynics and skeptics and people who are late adopters that will take some convincing. But we all encounter at some point or another as a clinician that job where actually we feel like we need to know the answer. And it might be that that time comes later for some than others. But I just want to make sure that first time they engage with this, they see the positive power of why this is important. And I think at this stage, culturally, to do anything enforced is a great risk. And I'm not, at this point, comfortable doing that. However, I don't know if any of my colleagues have any other ideas about whether we should move to do this more routinely.
Thanks, Matt. I don't disagree with any of that. I think my observation is this whole revolution has grown legs itself. We haven't pushed it necessarily. All we've done is a lot of background work in terms of the legal aspects, the ethical aspects, how we might input this into our organisation in a meaningful way so that the huge amount of work that the hospital team and the PHEM Feedback team do around giving us that feedback can be passed on. So this is what has been achieved without any coercion, any forcefulness. So imagine what could happen if that evolution continues. So I agree with Matt. I don't think we can enforce it. However, I have an obligation to look after the staff in the East of England Ambulance Service while they're caring for our patients as part of the board. So there has to be something that fits between maybe TRIM, PHEM feedback, something else where that whole culture piece starts to come alive and we can look after you in a meaningful way that might fall outside of both of those processes. I'm not sure.
So you mentioned the trim practitioner role, which essentially is where we will automatically get triggered to speak to patients, colleagues, who have been to specific jobs. And this was a discussion we had in our staff room the other day. Why does a hanging automatically give you a trim referral? Why are you automatically assumed that you're going to be negatively affected by that and that you are going to want to debrief that with somebody and be risk assessed for PTSD? It almost puts a stigma on it. I've been to a hanging, so now I'm going to have PTSD. Yes, for different people, that will be significant, but every different case that you get is emotional for a different reason. So the minute that we put a criteria on it, suddenly we've got a lot of referrals that perhaps weren't necessary, perhaps will cause the doctors in hospital to spend a lot of time writing reports, but also perhaps be a waste of actually those other cases where people might think, I won't bother putting in a request for that because it doesn't fall under the category where that service is appropriate. So that would be my worry, and that is definitely a hurdle we've had with the trim practitioner role, that we're calling up people saying, you've been referred because you went to a traumatic job last week. Did I? Which one was that then? And people reacting differently to those referrals too.
Thank you all. Do we have any else? Yes, Pete.
Understandably, there's been quite a focus on the higher acuity jobs, and I was just wondering how many requests we've had for feedback on more perhaps urgent care, medical type jobs where the interest is more on how diagnosis was reached from a number of differentials.
So I don't have the exact number for you, I'm afraid. We have had several so-called low acuity type requests, largely because the criteria that we use to kind of guide who should be, so which cases are appropriate are significant diagnostic uncertainty, by which we mean it's not totally obvious. If your leg's pointing this way, it's broken. And it's not just for curiosity, but I've no intention of changing it. So if someone in clear conscience says, well, actually, this is the difference between me telling them to go to their GP or bringing them to an emergency department with a 4-hour wait where they're going to sit there and then potentially develop delirium because they're in a new environment, then we will do those. So I think at the moment, it feels like the most natural thing for people to be requesting is the big sick type jobs. But, if they are critically unwell, if there is a significant emotional distress attached to it, we will still do it. We've as yet had no one come forward and say that they want it for significant emotional distress. But we can always have a look at what we're doing in terms of the more urgent care type of things. We have had a question from an ambulance service, who I won't name, whose interest in this project isn't for so much the well-being aspect, but can you feed back to us when we ask about, did the patient go through a non-ED pathway after we brought them to your ED? Did you reroute them? Can we learn anything from that? So there's lots of ways that you could apply this. The limitation at the moment is resources, staffing, a number of people we can get on our team. But it's certainly not something that we're adverse to helping with, because powerful learning happens in all acuity of patients, and we do want to be able to do that. Grace, do you have anything to add? Okay. Yes, Alison. We are not ensuring it. However, we acknowledge, and we spoke at our committee meeting today, we acknowledge this is a potential risk to the momentum of the project. Part of bringing people from all sorts of organisations today is to champion why this is important, and perhaps to reorientate some people within hospitals who might be very fixated on the targets that they're expected to meet, and to try and take a step back and to show that whilst a target for a patient is important within an emergency department, this patient's on a journey, and they're on a journey before and after. And so we will require more resources as we scale up to be able to achieve this. I can't predict what that resource requirement will be. At the moment, we're lucky that we have managed to create a feasible model with essentially no funding, which is why it is still growing slowly. My hope is that with more organisations that see the merit in this sort of work, and again, it might not be that organisations choose our way of doing it, but the more it happens, hopefully, the more we can determine what the intangible gains that we're seeing are, and hopefully, my hope is that this gets a level of resource from organisations that have the opportunity to do that. Anyone's a millionaire, let me know.
So what were my feelings when I heard about this project? Interesting. Over the years, I lost contact with Jonathan because I didn't know what the etiquette was, and it seemed to be that maybe I wasn't meant to contact him, maybe he wasn't meant to speak to me. I had this unique opportunity to meet him over the fundraising dinner. It was wonderful, but even there, should I really be talking to him with big questions? Should he be to me? It was very, very precious, but when I heard about this and bringing this communication into freedom and in an encouragement for patient to discuss with the paramedic and build relationship and understanding, I was very, very excited about that. And Jonathan and I have said today several times, isn't it wonderful to be given the freedom to interrelate, such that he and we and our families have said, okay, we're going to get together regularly now on a social basis and enjoy this freedom that this conference seems to have launched us into.
Thank you for those very kind words, Gordon. I think I might just... Oh, sorry. Yes, Ian. That's very valuable advice, and thank you. And it might well be that I pick your brains on how that might be done well. We, again, at our committee meeting earlier today, we were talking about how we bring this to the attention of people in positions of influence, and we hope to have a strategy meeting in the near future with our local patient groups and see if we can get our local CEOs to attend and explain quite why this is so important. But if you've got any tips, send me an email. Thank you. I wonder, I'm terribly sorry, if just because it's now 6:30 and it's time for our drink reception, but I wonder if I could just ask each of our panel if they could answer a question. Not from your own talk, Robbie. What have you learned from one of the other speakers here today?
Don't be a dick.
Now I have to follow that, don't I? I think what I've learned is the patient is always the main focus, certainly what drives me to get out of bed in the morning. And Gordon, your interaction with Jonathan will live with me forever. So that's what I've learned, is keep it about the patient, and it will always work.
Yeah, I was actually about to say something very similar with Gordon and Jonathan. The moment when Jonathan said, it's had an enormous impact on me, knowing what happened and then developing this relationship afterwards. It's a heart-stopping moment, because I don't think that when I looked at my own career, I've not interacted with my patients after the event anywhere near as much as I should have done, if ever, really. And yeah, it certainly made me think a lot.
So I think I've been really heartened by what Tracy was talking about leadership. Leadership is you, and the flattened hierarchies that we've been talking about this afternoon. I find that really inspiring.
This was the first time I've heard Esther speak. I've been looking forward to it because I've heard a lot about the talk previously, but just to be aware of our own sort of mental health first aid and those really simple steps we can make just to sort of cognitively offload our own thoughts and prevention of moral injury.
I think how refreshing it is to see that this feedback, patient feedback, can be used in such a positive light and a clear move away from maybe a blame culture that there has been historically, and I think that's just really refreshing.
Generally, I would just like to say how inspired I am to see you, Matthew, and Grace and team thinking outside the box and leading forward. One of the slides by one of the speakers said the first thing we think about is we think about the bad. And that came out in Jonathan's reaction to Grace phoning him. The first thing I thought about was bad. Am I going to be locked up for something? What speaker had the most effect on me? Yeah, I have to say, Jonathan. It's just had an enormous impact on me to stand on the platform with him and to hear not just his words, but his emotion, and how he as a person has said to me that he mentions my name in his weekly lectures to his students. It has had an enormous impact on me. So the reaction from my part in living is always look for opportunity to feedback positively.
Ladies, gentlemen, colleagues and friends, I don't think I could have said it any better myself. Thank you so much for coming to the PHEM Feedback Showcase today. Thank you for your enthusiasm and your engagement. As Tracy says, we're not the only team that are doing this. You may be working in a region of the country where people are similarly trying to achieve aims like ours. Wherever they're working, try and champion this sort of work. Help us to bring it to national attention and help us to bring this sort of work to as many people as possible. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, there's wine outside. Shall we? Thank you all for coming. Really lovely to see you all, and enjoy the reception now.